Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the stream. Hope everyone is doing well on this Sunday, the 5th of, what is it? Oh, sorry, the 11th of May. Good morning, Samantha. Hope you're doing well today. Good morning, Shadow. Hope you're doing well. Nice, quiet Sunday morning. Good evening, Braden. Hope you're doing well. Hopefully my microphone is connected. There we go. Yes. Yes, it is. Oh yes, of course, it's Mother's Day today. No, it might explain it. Need to find the correct chapter for Billy Bob. Well, I'm glad you enjoy the content, Fork. It's very much appreciated. Yeah, AI's, I think, only going to steadily worse. And it's not just our little pond that it's infecting, it's pretty much infecting everything at this point. Ooh, excuse me. Some of the children's content that's been made with AI is just horrifying. Somebody likes you enough, Captain, to try subbing again. Well, thank you very much for the subscription tier 1. It's very much appreciated, Shadow. So, Quinza is 15? 15. 15. 16. Is that right? Yes. Here. Yeah, and that's also a problem. Thank you very much, Anthony. Very much appreciated. Yeah. The only thing I can think to do with the AI channels for me is just keep doing what I'm doing, and then hopefully something changes. Not likely, but that's all I can hope for. And then the other thing is streaming makes it more personable, which AI can't be. So that's also something I'm trying. Yeah. Part of my thumbnail process is to not make it look like any AI channel. And that's it. Look, I think it's a useful tool in some cases. It's just, yeah, being abused, methinks. Oh, thank you, Fork Cartel. Very much appreciated. I will keep doing what I can do. So we're falling behind. That migraine was a 3-day migraine. It was awesome. So we are behind. Today we'll be doing Biddy Bib. Then tomorrow will have to be T-Foss and re-T-Foss just to keep up. And then we try record a little bit extra every day, I suppose, to try and make up the difference. That's true. That's true. That monster's fighting back. Okay, what's my headphones? Excuse me. Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Okay, we're coming through. Just testing the feedback into the old headphones there. Uh, 16. Anyway, I think we'll move into the first recording of the day. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of re-T-Foss, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This one is called Betty Bob's Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 15. Oh, thank you, Vengeful. Thank you. Glad to have you here. Good day, mate. Thinks the correct response. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. I'm not as chipper as I normally am today because, 3 days of migraine. I actually got some sleep last night, but still tired. But we shall soldier through. Caste matriarch Elizabeth approached the entrance to her private hunting reef. Her servants had released a few Veruvian slugs and some hallucid otters in the large underwater chamber for her to hunt. Technically, they were semi-intelligent creatures on a path for full intelligence, but the Crustacan matriarchs had blocked all attempts to change their status from unprotected wildlife to the much more strictly regulated, potentially illegal species list. To the much more strictly regulated, potentially intelligent species list. They were simply too tasty. Not to mention, there was far more. There was. Or simply good day. Yeah, that works too. Yes, a lot of people enjoyed that. You can still listen to it kinda on Amazon, but it is AI read with the Amazon system. To the much more strict. They were simply too tasty. Not to mention that it was more fun to hunt something a bit smarter than usual. For her specifically, she enjoyed the fear in their eyes before she ended them. You only got that with something that had a glimmer of personality behind those eyes. Her favorite was, of course, their ancient nemesis, the Libertonians. She had been a juvenile when she tasted them in the last Galactic War. They had resisted the idea of a galactic government that regulated and suppressed species to operate at around an equal level of capability, in order to make things fair. The Libertonians argued for more freedom, less regulations. And why shouldn't they? They were stronger, faster, smarter, and they could fly. She wasn't ashamed to admit her species was jealous of their ability to fly. Who, among the galactic community, wasn't jealous of those who could stretch their wings and take off into the sky? The Crusticans could breathe The Crusticans could breathe both water and air and swim the ocean depths with ease. But to fly? It had been difficult for them to convince the other races to fall in line and agree to regulation. After all, only the exceptional suffered. And the thing about being exceptional, they were the exception. And few species could contain their jealousy of a species that was superior to them. They fought valiantly, but in the end, they were defeated by sheer numbers. The Crusticans' greatest victory was in keeping their nemesis alive, however, in reducing them to a single colony off their home planet and a bare minimum fleet, to force them to watch the galaxy continue as they were left powerless. They refused to be entirely beaten, of course, Good morning, Muskup. Hope you're doing well. They refused to be entirely beaten, of course, which was why, from time to time, the matriarch got to dine upon a spy or a diplomat that went missing. Being the galaxy's secret police had its advantages in acquiring the rarest of food, especially if eating such food was against a dozen different regulations and laws. Somehow, that made the meal tastier. Her mandibles quivered in anticipation of her feast tonight. But before she could open the hatch and begin her hunt, she heard the vidscreen chime at her. Normally she'd ignore it, but this was the screech of her emergency line. The matriarch hissed in annoyance and moved over to the vidscreen, turning it on with her foreclaws. "What?" she hissed out, and saw Cast Leader Cleroy cower for a moment. "I'm sorry, matriarch, but there have been more developments with the Libertonian diplomat." All 12 of her eyes narrowed as she examined the screen and the Cast Leader looking out at her. The one with the copy of the suppression device, you mean? The one who could possibly end the galaxy as we know it? The one who was traveling alone and trying to avoid detection? Who was traveling alone? The one traveling alone to try and avoid detection and should have been captured cycles ago. The one who is trying to make it to the capital for the Grand Council. That diplomat. Is this the diplomat you speak of, Cleroy? As if there was any other diplomat that I have ordered you to track. Is this that diplomat that you're referring to? The same diplomat that has found a Death World mercenary that killed a hunter-killer squad and injured Cast Leader Bleeblob. There was a pause as Cleroy waited, unsure if the matriarch was going to continue. Yes? Oh well, now that I know which diplomat you're referring to, what is it? The Death Worlder is a grave threat, and we can't find them. They haven't been stopping at refueling stations, but the ship only has a single pilot. We're unsure how they're avoiding detection, but I assure you that we're doing our best to track them down. Clearly, your best isn't good enough. Have all available Cast Leaders in the sector patch into this mission. Criminals, smugglers, pirates, they all take a back seat to this diplomat. Yes, matriarch, but about the Death Worlders, I think it's a mistake to start moving against their extrasolar colonies. This American subspecies seems to be truly independent of their larger government, which has been cooperative so far. Cleroy, I wasn't sure. Cleroy, I wasn't aware that you doubled in size, grown 6 new limbs, 8 eyes, and changed your reproductive organs. When did this happen? Cast Leader was clearly confused. I haven't, matriarch? Oh, so you're not a matriarch then? No, matriarch. Then why are you questioning our decision? The council has decided the easiest way to end this situation is to start conquering colonies and threatening to kill filthy humans until the mercenary surrenders the diplomat. If you don't want to happen... If you don't want that to happen, then find her on your own. But matriarch, the new footage I found... If you read the report, it's clearly fake, Clear-Eye. Such a piece... If you read the report... it is clearly fake, Clear-Eye. Such a species can't exist. Nothing that is strong is small. Thank you very much, Vengeful. Every little bit helps. It is also super appreciated. Can't exist. Nothing that strong is that small, and even if they are good fighters, we can use our police action to justify a full galactic war against them. We defeated the Libertonians. We can stop these humans. And if you can't find this mercenary, it's clearly because he's terrified. Likely cowering in some hole like he was vermin he is. Likely cowering in some hole like the vermin he is. Soiling himself in fear as our hunter-killers close in on him. There will be no mercy for this Billy Bob, space trucker. Billy Bob. Gotta add the echo. Billy Bob, space trucker. Why would you sign up to the contest? Because I'm a shoo-in. That doesn't translate. Because I can't lose. Why would you sign up for this contest? Because I'm a shoo-in. Doesn't translate. Because I can't lose. They've been on this human dancing fair. They've based this on human dancing from the mid-1900s, as far as I can tell. I listen to this music all the time, and I'm a good dancer. I crushed those space flaccos at the refueling station, remember? Oh, I think your translator isn't properly calibrated. Yeah. They were supposed to be good dancers, right? And they got beat so bad they tried to attack me. And then I knocked them flat. Billy Bob, this competition is supposed to be for groups. You'll have to do all the dances solo. You can't tell me that... Oh, right, yes. Your species has incredible endurance. Okay. Well, you're supposed to have costumes. Did you think about that? Where are you going? Where are you? Emily stopped, looking around as she remembered that they were in the middle of a black market station. You need me to buy you some things, don't you? Please? It's a bit of a rush, but it's simple stuff. I have a few pieces I keep in my truck for Halloween. I just need to get a few items to complete some others. Don't you have money? Most of it went to fuel. I was supposed to get paid in real credits by those space hippies. You should know the space hippies use real credits as little as possible. Hey, I'm new to the galaxy. I know. Come on, Emily. Please. No, please, come on. Billy Bob, please, pretty please. With the cherry on top, come on. I'll let you take whatever we win, unless it's a trophy. I get that. You won't let this go, will you? Not a chance. Fine. But you have to promise to do what I want at the next stop. Yeah, Billy Bob grinned. Deal. I swear whatever you want. Emily sighed out and handed him her trade cube before he turned and rushed off to whatever store he found costumes in. She returned to the restaurant and sighed out. She returned to the restaurant and sighed out. The waiter had left their drinks on the table, and she sat heavily, taking a sip of the hot beverage she had ordered. She couldn't believe the energy Billy Bob had. He was downright manic when he discovered something that excited him. If this was how adult humans behaved, what were their children like? She shuddered at the thought. It was a few minutes before he returned with a big smile on his face as he handed the cube back to her and sat down. She shook her head as he sipped at his own drink. Then he waved the waiter down, asked for a bunch of ice, and he got it dropped. And once he got it, dropped a few chunks of ice into the tea to cool it off further. Then he drank it all in one go as Emily stared. How do you drink so much caffeine at once? Doesn't it make you sick? What? No. This is just like one cup of tea. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking Super Space Extreme Triple Caffeine. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking a Super Space Extreme Triple Cafe Mocha. Express Mocha. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking a Super Space Extreme Triple Caffeine. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking a Super Space Extreme Triple Caffeine Express Mocha with extra cream. But She frowned and shook her head. I don't want to know what that is. It's a crap ton of caffeine is what that is. It is a crap ton of caffeine, sugar, chocolate, and cream. And then usually some whiskey, 'cause that really warms you up. Human diets are so strange. You can go... You can just process large amounts of caffeine. Yeah, I mean, if I'm drinking regular stuff, I can't drink enough to kill me. If I'm drinking regular stuff, I can't drink enough to kill me. Unless I'm holding it in with my bladder bursts, but that's a dumb way to kill myself. She blinked a bit, her mask blank as she tried to figure out how to proceed. And you also intake capsaicin? Yeah, depending on what kind of food you're eating. Latin stuff, some Asian things. But I say stay away from anything made by Indians. Far as I can tell, they're just pissed at how much beef we eat, so they don't actually make food. Then, what do they make? They make pure... Then... They make puree terrorism that leads to gut-wrenching ass explosions. That's what you feel like when you're... That makes you feel like you're crapping fire, Emily grimaced. The kind of screaming craps that turns athletes... Nope. That makes you feel like you're crapping shit. That makes you feel like you're crapping fire, Emily grimaced. The kind of screaming craps that turns atheists into religious fanatics, begging any god who will listen for mercy. Billy Bob, what? I'm not the one who tries to pass off that dog diarrhea as food. Billy Bob, stop, she gasped out, two of her hands covering her face, the other two gesturing as she tried to drive the images out from her head. Well, I'm glad that it doesn't seem like a lot of work, because that's the sign of good work, you know. You put the work in, and you need to make it look easy. That's the trick. But I like showing people the how to do this stuff. Two of her hands covering her face. If that makes any sense. Billy Bob, stop. So, I mean, I do the raw audio. I edit as I go, which is called punch and roll editing. Then at the end, I'll process it. I'll send it to my wife. She'll give it a second edit. So any clicks and sounds that I've missed, she'll get rid of. She checks it for spacing of words, not words, sentences. So if I'm rushing, she slows down puts bigger spaces where I should be pausing. Or if I'm taking too long of a pause, she shortens that. And then she puts the scrolling text, and away we go. Billy Bob, stop, she gasped out. But yeah, a 10-minute audio thing probably takes 2 hours. She gasped out. Or 3, depending on factors. Billy Bob, stop. She gasped out, two of her hands covering her face, the other two gesturing as she tried to drive the images from her head. She was fairly sure her translator wasn't even getting the right words. What it sounded like was making her sick. There is no way that's accurate. You've never had Indian food, I'm telling you. Those vegetarians can hold a grudge for eating their sacred animal. Stop, enough. You'll make me sick. She shrugged at that and waved over the waiter to order another spiced tea. Emily sighed out and shook her head as he looked at her. Tell you what, why don't I treat you to some real American cooking? Real old classic stuff. The things I had when I was a kid and my mom wanted to feel warm and comfy. Emily paused at that and slowly nodded. That sounds interesting, actually. Good. Can you handle dairy? Well, I mean, I won't know until I eat it, will I? Good point. All right, I'll go talk to the chef, see what he's got. All right. All right, I'll go talk to the chef, see if he's got the stuff in stock. He paused and looked at Emily. She looked back. He stood there, staring at her without speaking. She was about to ask what, then sighed and pulled a cube back out, setting it into his hand. Thanks. Thanks. Emily sat at her seat, wondering just what she was getting herself into. It took about 10 minutes before he returned with 2 plates and 2 bowls. She tried to figure out what she was looking at. Squares of bread and a soup of sort of. A soup. The soup sort of looked like a... It couldn't be filled with blood, could it? Grilled cheese with bacon and Texas toast with tomato soup and sour cream. Oh, so it's not blood. What? No, Jesus. It's just some mashed up plants and herbs and stuff. Apparently human food is a huge seller with the underground omnivore and carnivore markets. It's space gobos. The space gobos are spreading it through their stations already. Space gobos? You humans shorten everything, don't you? Yep. He sat down, pulling his square apart as she saw the strings of yellow, with some sort of reddish crispy something inside of it. He dunked part of it into the soup and then bit the portion off, grinning, as he clearly enjoyed it. Emily slowly dipped a corner of her own square into the soup, removing her mask after glancing around for a moment, and then snapping at the corner. She quickly opened her mouth, gasping and waving a hand in front of her while she laughed. Gasping and waving a hand in front of it while he laughed. Sorry, it's kind of hot. She nodded and took a sip of her water before she settled down and thought it over. That's pretty good. He smiled and dunked another bit of his, well, now it was a triangle. Either way, he dunked it and held it in the air. She looked at him, and he wiggled it in the air for a moment, and slowly she dunked part of hers, before holding it up. He bumped her square with his triangle. Cheers! They ate the rest of it. They ate the rest of it then, bit by bit, as hers cooled off a bit more. There were a couple moments where she tried to pull away a piece from the yellow stuff, just kept... Piece from the yellow... There were a couple moments where she tried to pull away a piece, and the yellow stuff just kept following her, which had Billy Bob laughing as she tried twisting and turning it to get it to stop following her lead. Which had Billy Bob laughing as she tried twisting and turning it to get it to stop following her head. He didn't let her finish her square though, and instead had her drink up the soup until they just bits were sticking out the bowl, And instead had her drink up the soup until just the last bits were sticking to the bowl. Then he showed her how to scrape off the last of the soup with the last of her square. So that's an American meal? One of them. Classic stuff from when I was a kid. Hell, the first thing I learned to make myself was grilled cheese. 'Cause microwaving hot dogs doesn't count. He laughed for a moment, and Emily felt rather full and satisfied. Well, if that's your style of cooking, I think I wouldn't mind it. But not all the time. Your meals are rather large for my kind. I'll make you a smaller portion next time. Don't want you getting sick. She smiled at that and shook her head. You're full of surprises. Your species is small, yet intensely strong. Your endurance is off the charts, and your diet. You can fight, fly, and cook reasonably well. She shook her head again. Not to mention you're one of the battle dance species. Well, we aren't really. I just learned how to dance really well, 'cause I like it. We have a few cultures that dance before the battle, but they mostly lost to guys who just shoot them instead of letting them finish. Aside from sports, I mean. Not legal to shoot... Not legal to shoot the team. Not legal to shoot the home team as they dance around. She wasn't quite sure if she was serious or not. She wasn't quite sure if he was serious or not. What kind of war do you engage in? Total. What? Total war, mostly. Every so often it's just armies against armies out in fields and stuff. Worked that way for a while. But plenty of times, and especially after America became... But plenty of times, and especially after America became independent nations, fought for keeps. destroying everything and couldn't keep, ravishing supply lines, starving whole countries. Feck, the Russians played for keeps. They burned their own crap just to spite the guys invading them. And people still kept trying to invade. They'd burn their own land? Oh, and towns and supplies. Whatever they couldn't take and defend. If they could time it properly, they'd burn it with the enemy advancing into the fire. This from a country that snowed for most of the year. Emily frowned at that. Trudy? Well, it's fecking cold. -40 in the winter, I think. She balked at that. What? But your species is okay in standard temperature. Yeah. I mean, California, where I'm from, is almost there. I mean, California, where I'm from, is often in the low hundreds in the summer. She gasped again. What? Your species just survives fine in both -40 and low 100s? In Fahrenheit. I'm not sure if they're I'm not sure if your translator is loaded with that, or space metric. -40 is actually the same in both. I think the high end would be space metric. He squinted a bit as he tried to remember. 50? Maybe. Mid-40s. Oh, yes, I think that's more reasonable then. Why do you have 2 units of temperature? 'Cause ours is better. What? Then whose? Look, we shouldn't discuss units of measure used on Earth. It's a sore subject, 'cause the world wants the Americans to change, and we tell them to shove it. Shove what? It. Just, I'll try to explain it later. She shook her head slowly, clearly confused. Then he perked up. My implant pinked. My costumes are ready. Come on, Emily. Gotta come with me in one. Gotta get... My costumes are ready. Come on, Emily. You gotta come watch me dance. He sighed out and jumped and rushed out, and she had to follow him, quickly putting her mask back on. He was halfway down the street when she saw a squad of Phyllis enter the cultural dance center, however. She gasped softly, as she feared they might be looking to settle the score with the space trucker. Billy Bob! She cried out and cursed. It seemed like the dance competition was going to be a lot more competitive than she thought. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. End of chapter. Oh, I don't have to say that. End. Old habits die hard. Hydrate. It's pretty common editing form for narrating. That's actually, I think, the most common form of editing for narrators. Because one of the other, not weird things, but things that happen with for narrators is we do voices in real time. Or they do voices in real time. So you don't like a game or something like that, where you get voice actors acting different voices at different times, and then you edit them together. In narration, you do it all in one go. Less editing. To be fair, most people don't vengeful. I'm glad you're enjoying it. My recording studio's decently sized. There are successful narrators that read in their closets on their laptop and do the punch and roll editing. In fact, I've done it at some points. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. No. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of 3TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker, and is a series. Which is a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 17. Emily had tried to catch up with Billy Bob, but she couldn't find him in the mass of people moving through the station. So she returned to the Cultural Dance Center to see if she could warn him before things got started. She saw some fillers standing in the crowd, but didn't see the squad she'd noticed earlier. All sorts of species were here, talking and waiting for the event to begin. She looked around, trying to see where the competition... She looked around, trying to see where the competitors waited between sets, but she only saw a door at the back that was guarded. Cursing softly under her breath, she looked around to find it out. Cursing softly under her breath, she looked around to try and find an event organizer. Spotting a banktier with a data state and an earpiece. Spotting a banktier with a data slate and earpiece. I'm looking for my friend. He said he's competing tonight. Can you show me where he has to go so I can talk to him? Can you show me where to go as I talk to him? Can you show me where to go so I can talk to him? The banktier just stared at her. The banktier just stared at his data slate. Sorry, dancers... The banktier... Morning, Phoenix Ball. Hope you're doing well. The banktier just stared at his data state. Sorry, dancers can't be disturbed before the program begins. Each set will come out and dance and return to their chambers if they advance to the next round. Emily sighed and then figured all she could do was wait and hope for the best. She pressed through the crowd to find a table near the edge of the dance floor. Most of the crowd. Thank you very much for the gifted, the super chat. Super chat, yes. Very much appreciated. Vengeful. Very, very, very appreciated. Near the edge of the dance floor. Most of the crowd was standing and talking, so she figured that she could get a seat early. After a few minutes, the lights dimmed and brightened as the crowd started to find seats, all stand around the area. A banktier, wearing some sort of strange black and white suit, stepped out of the center of the dance floor. Esteemed species of all varieties, welcome to tonight's cultural dance tournament. We've got a very impressive selection of dancers tonight, and even one last entry that should prove interesting. For those of you who are attending for the first time, our panel of judges will announce the genre or theme of the song the dance teams must choose, and then the predetermined order they'll come out and dance. They're ranked according to skill, difficulty, and flair. Those who continue on to the next round return to their preparation room until the next round. Please, I must ask you to refrain from distracting the dancers. This is a very serious tournament, after all. Applause and cheers are allowed, however. As usual, this music is taken from a rather interesting and barbaric culture that has more variations of music than we've encountered before. Some such a young... Well. Good morning, Kandari. I hope you're doing well. Some such a... that is more... barbaric culture. barbaric culture. Rather interesting and this music, where is it? Lost my spot. As usual, this music is taken from a rather interesting and barbaric culture that has more variations of music than we've encountered before from such a young species. Please enjoy yourselves. With that, he walked off the stage as everyone got quiet. She could see the judges sitting on a platform to the side of the dance floor, while everyone who couldn't get a seat stayed close to the edges. Slowly, the strange orb Billy Bob had recognized dropped from the ceiling, spinning around as it began to shine all across the room. There was a murmur of surprise before the music began to play, and the announcer came in. This first number is from the last-minute entry who's never competed before, performing a free choice song. This first number is from a last-minute entry who's never competed before, performing a free choice song. Please give a warm welcome to our first contestant, Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Billy Bob. I'm doing as well as can be, Kandaria. Thank you for asking. Space Trucker. Billy Bob strutted out of the black door and onto the dance floor as the music began. Emily wasn't sure why, but he was wearing a yellow hat that looked rather rigid, and some sort of orange vest over a red shirt. He was wearing those familiar blue jeans, but he also had some sort of belt with strange implements tucked into it. Then the song began. Young men, there is no need to feel down. He began to stomp, clap, and twist with the song, and overall the crowd began to nod to the beat. But when the song began to chant some sort of chorus, he began... But when the song began to chant some sort of chorus, he began to move his arms in time with the music to form symbols that a translator told her matched the start of each letter. The crowd murmured in surprise as he could match up the symbols with the chant so quickly, and began to cheer out. The judges nodded at that, scribbling on their data slates. Emily was watching the fillers in the crowd, however, but she noticed that they were nodding and bobbing with the music more than anyone else. This wasn't an ambush. They were simply here to enjoy the music. She let out a heavy sigh of relief and relaxed in her chair, able to just enjoy the music. It was nothing like the stuff Billy Bob listened to when he was driving, but she figured it was some sort of old ritual song of some sort. The song slowly faded away as Billy Bob waved and the crowd cheered for the first timer. He saw Emily and grinned, quickly moving over to her table. Not bad, huh? Very good. Not bad, huh? Very good. Not bad. Not bad, huh? Very good. Yes. Not bad, huh? Yes, very good, Billy Bob. They turned then to watch the other dance teams perform their first song. There were no less than 2 Phyllis teams, each with 5 dancers. One team was clearly better, but both were good. Next was a team of 4 N-hits. R-hits. Next was a form of Arnotts, an insectoid with 4 arms and 4 legs that the Bengtiers hired as guards. These seemed to be on break. They performed something called the Hokey Pokey. They looked blitz. They looked a bit stiff, but obviously tried their best. Emily was surprised to see a pair of Greslins march out, however, their exosuits decorated in some sort of glowing light display. They normally would never step foot on a black market station, considering their species' strict moral codes. This must be an exception. They started dancing something called the robot, which Billy Bob muttered was cheating. Near the end of their performance, though, one of the exosuits stopped, and there was a hissing and a pop as it malfunctioned. The other Greslin tried to finish the dance alone, but the judges were shaking their heads. It was pretty obvious when the judges announced the Greslins were out that they weren't impressed. So they So the Greslin dragged the malfunctioning suit off the dance floor as Billy Bob nodded and headed back to prepare for the next song. The lights came back up then, and the crowd was already talking. Emily had many of them murmur about how surprised they were that once created. The lights came back up then. That they weren't impressed. So the Greslin dragged the malfunctioning suit off the dance floor as Billy Bob nodded and headed back to prepare for the next song. The lights came back up then, and the crowd was already talking. Emily had many of them. The lights came back up then, and the crowd was already talking. Emily heard many of them murmur about how surprised they were that one creature had entered on his own. Could he really expect to perform so many dances as the lead act and keep impressing people? Emily just smiled behind a mask. They'd certainly get to know Billy Bob and his endurance soon enough. Then the lights dimmed and raised to announce the next challenge was about to begin. Bill! Good morning, Lady Blackwind. Hope you're doing well today. We will now witness a series of dances using songs that tell historical tales of the culture's past. We will now witness a series of dances using songs that tell the historical tales from the culture's past. The judges announced. The music began, and it was heavy with drums and some sort of instruments that Emil hadn't heard before. Emily, not Emil. The music began, and it was heavy with drums and some sort of instruments that Emily hadn't heard before. Billy Bob emerged from the door wearing a set of black pants, strange boots, a red shirt, and a giant black fuzzy thing on his head. She didn't understand. He didn't know. He didn't walk down to the stage, though. Instead, he moved in an odd way, kicking one leg out ahead of the other while keeping his arms crossed. By the time he got to the dance floor, she couldn't believe how low his body seemed as he kicked out his legs in that strange dance. Then the singing finally began. There lived a certain man in Russia long ago. Emily gasped as Billy Bob began to kick out one leg as he tossed his arms out, or would switch between balancing on his toes of either foot as he kicked the other out. As he kicked the other leg out. The balance he was displaying was unheard of among species she knew, not to mention the strength it had to require to support his body on just his toes while squatting like that. That strange chant in the background as he kicked out, "Rah, rah, Rasputin." The story had to be some sort of legend where there was no such person could survive the things the singers said were being done to him. But then again, humans seem to be very hard to kill. Maybe this was some sort of inspirational song then, about becoming even harder to kill than normal. Finally, the song ended as Billy Bob extended a hand up and kicked both legs out at the same time before bringing them back in and standing up straight. The crowd cheered out, unable to believe what they'd witnessed. Billy Bob was breathing hard, but he was smiling as he stepped over to Emily to watch the other teams. The first Phyllis team came out after him with some sort of song about a crazy lady named Ma Baker. But Billy Bob frowned as he saw their costumes. The Chicago Cubs, that's a baseball team, you fecking idiots. Shaking his head as they performed an acrobatic, very flexible style of dance that the Fleckos were known for. It lacked the sheer strength and endurance of Billy Bob's crazy leg dance, but it was quite good as well. The next Phyllis team came out with the strange hats and seemed rather large and stiff, but not like the one Billy Bob had earlier. And strange blotchy pants and vests. The hell are those trying to be? Cowboys? Jesus. Billy Bob muttered as the song began. This here's a story about Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. This here is a story about Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. Emily looked up at Billy Bob. No relation, but it's also the wrong time period for their song. Seriously. You people seem to have a lot of songs about robbing people. It's sort of a trend. The Phyllis were a little more awkward than the team that came before, but they weren't bad either. After they were finished and the actnets came out, having painted themselves green, but were wearing strange robe-like dresses. She looked at Billy Bob, who shrugged a little. The song began, singing about some sort of terrible creature named Godzilla. As Billy Bob slapped his face with his palm. They think Godzilla was Japanese, so they're wearing kimonos. Jesus Christ. Shaking his head as he watched, they stomped around, seeming to mimic the creature that was being sung about. But it wasn't as impressive as the Phyllis or Billy Bob. Once they were done, the judges conferred and announced the Arnott's were out. It seemed they'd agreed with Emily's take on the dance. It seemed they agreed with Emily's take on dancing. Now, to show these people a real fecking cowboy, Billy Bob muttered as he walked to the back as the lights came on. The Arnotts chittered happily as Emily realized the guards were just thrilled that they'd made it to the second round. She giggled a little at the thought that they had no idea what they'd dressed up as and just winged it. Human music was very catchy. It made people want to dance. The crowd was talking, and now most buzz was about Billy Bob, which made Emily smile. She had to agree with the murmurs spreading through the club about how it seemed impossible for him to have done that strange leg dance, but now they knew why he entered the dance on his own. The Phyllis could jump around and do acrobatics, but he was able to show extreme balance and endurance all at once. The simplicity of his movements somehow made them more impressive. Soon the lights flickered, and everyone quieted down as the judge spoke again. For the next set, the contestants had to do some research. They had to pick a song that was more about rural life, or at least involving work or time after work. The song started, and right away a voice sang out, "Good time!" Billy Bob emerged in a strange outfit. Billy Bob's jeans had returned with some strange pointy boots with intricate carvings, and a jacket that had strange frills on it. He also had one of the hats that Phyllis had. Ooh. He also had one of the hats that Phyllis had before, but his looked much more suited to his head. When he started to dance, she recognized part of it as that strange dance he'd done to intimidate the Phyllis back in the refueling station. His thumbs were tucked into his belt for part of the time as he stomped and shifted to the beat, twisting and pulling his hands out to clap before tucking them back into his belt. Unlike the look of serious concentration from before, he also had a big grin on his face. This song seemed to be singing about good times after a long week of working. So maybe it held special meaning for him that she had no idea. So maybe it held special meaning for him. She had no idea. She was impressed with his ability to keep his dance set on a series of mental lines, though. So maybe this song seemed to be singing about good times after a long week of working. So maybe it held special meaning for him. She had no idea. She was impressed with his ability to keep his dance set on a series of mental lines, though, working the same forward and backwards, all side to side, around the same central position, like some sort of line dance. Near the end of the song, though, he pulled a hand from his belt to take his hat off, waving it as he danced with more flourishes to the end of the song on a high note. Waving it to end the song on a high note. Once more the crowd cheered as he... Near the end of the song, though, he pulled a hand from his belt to take his hat off, waving it as he danced with more flourishes to end the song on a high note. Once more the crowd cheered as he stepped off to the side, looking a little flushed as she was looking a little flushed as he was lightly sweating. So many dances back to back were starting to wear on him, but he looked ready for more. He watched the first Phyllis team then come out onto the dance floor, wearing jumpsuits which made him frown. Then the song started with a lone voice. "I want my own TV." He noticed the back of the jumpsuit said moving service, and shrugged a little as Money for Nothing started. But when they began to move like they had before, spinning on the ground and demonstrating their agility, he groaned. "Breakdancing to Money for Nothing, that's fecking sacrilege, even if their costume is closer this time." Emily just glanced at the human, grumbling about his competition. When the next song came on, they were wearing white shirts and black stripes, or black shirts with white stripes, and some sort of mask over their faces, holding bags with strange curvy symbols on the side with a slash in it. Her translator told her there was a sign for money. Bank robbers, Billy Bob muttered. Bank robbers, Billy Bob muttered when the song began, and she heard him snort. Bank robbers dancing to money. The singing began, and they started to move, but the beat was a little too slow for the filler style of dance. It didn't really fit. Then she remembered Billy Bob had listened to this song before on that record, Pink Side of the Moon. Either way, they didn't... Either way, she didn't think it really fit with what they were trying to do. Indeed, once it was over, the judges stood and announced that the team was out. Now, it was just Billy Bob and the last Phyllis team. They were staring over at him now, sizing up their final opponent. Billy Bob just grinned back at them and walked to the back. Oh, there's a dog here. Didn't even know it was here. I just heard a snoring sound coming from behind me. Must have snuck in. Final opponent. Sizing up their final. Yeah, puppy. Good morning, Sticks. Hope you're having a great day, or as well as can be. The final opponent. Billy Bob just grinned back at them and walked to the back to prepare. As the lights came on, the Phyllis team, who just lost, were arguing amongst one another over their loss. Was it the song? Well, was it one of the dancers? Was it the song, or one of the other dancers? None of them agreed on who had messed up. None of them had agreed on who had messed it up for the others. Emily giggled and waited. The crowd was all talking about Billy Bob by now, and she wondered how he'd finish up. Soon the lights flickered, and everyone was waiting anxiously. The last song shall have occult references, said the judge simply, before everyone looked to the door. There was the sound of something creaking, and then footsteps. Billy Bob was slowly walking out towards the dance floor. He was wearing some sort of bright red and black jacket, with red pants, and his face looked different, green, as if he was dead. He was dragging a foot as he got onto the dance floor, and then the song began, and he seemed to jump to life. It's close to midnight. He started to dance with the song, moving in time with the beat, switching between looking stiff and almost dead to moving with incredible speed and grace. The song was creepy, about some sort of monster or dead thing hunting someone, but his dance seemed to make it seem like he was that monster, albeit as one who could dance. When the song was over, everyone cheered out, and he smiled and moved off to the side with a grin. We're doing as well as can be, Sticks. We're doing as well as can be. It was just the last Philistine then, and they came out wearing black hoods for some reason, except for one guy in the back wearing what looked like an American blue jeans. As the music began, one Phyllis in the back began to hit a small metal box with a stick. No, the cowbell, Billy Bob murmured next to her as she looked over at him. All our times have come. It seemed to be a strange song about something called the Reaper who collected souls. The Phyllis began to dance that was a bit more human looking, less acrobatics, and more trying to move with the beat. But then one of the back just jumped around, smacking that metal bit Billy Bob called a cowbell. Once it was over, the judges were murmuring to each other. Billy Bob was looking up. The Phyllis were looking up. Dear species, we have a tie on our hands. There was gasps of surprise, and Billy Bob grunted in annoyance. However, our rules dictate the tiebreaker be a duet. Everyone looked to Billy Bob, who then pointed at Emily. I'll use her as my partner, no sweat. Emily blinked in surprise. What? Excellent. You have 10 minutes to prepare. The Phyllis rushed backstage as Billy Bob pulled Emily along with him. Billy Bob, I'm not a dancer like you. That's okay. We'll just do the tango. He had her backstage now and shoved her into this room where these other costumes were strewn about on a table. He had her backstage now and shoved her into a room where his other costumes were strewn out on a table. He began to pull off the red and black thing that he had on now, wiping the green makeup off his face. I don't know how to do that. It's okay. Like a great Al Pacino once said, there's no mistakes in the tango. You just get tangled up and tango on. He was quickly putting his regular clothes back on, including his American flag hat. Then he turned back to her. Okay, so just step up to me. He held his hands. Okay, so just step up. Okay, so just. Okay. Okay, just step up to me. He held his arms out a bit as she stepped up, but he was reminded that she was taller than him, and his eyes were level where her collarbone should be. And his eyes were level to where her collarbone should be. And his eyes were level to where her collarbone and his eyes were level to where her collarbone should be, if she has one, but he wasn't sure if she did or not. Crap, I forgot you're taller than me, that's... We'll get over Well, I'll get over it. Just take my hands with yours, your top ones. I don't know what you should do with your lower ones. Just something. Anyway, when I whisper copy, you just do what I'm doing. Keep your feet near mine. Keep your feet near mine. I'll take the lead. When I say mirror, you pretend that you're my mirror and do what I do, but the opposite way. Let's try. They tried out for a minute or two as Emily stared mostly at her feet. They moved all right, but she was far from sure about her motions. Inside the room was a buzzer that stamped. Inside the room was a buzzer that sounded as he pulled her to the door. Okay, come on then. She gasped out, entirely not ready, but unable to stop him from dragging her back out to the dance floor. He scrolled through his implant till he found the Fugo Lento. Hugo. He scrolled through his implant until he found a Fugo Lento. He didn't have much in the way of tango music, but these Xenos had never heard tango before, so it didn't matter. Once they were on the dance floor, he gripped Emily by one. Once on the dance floor, he danced with. Once they were on the dance floor, he gripped Emily by one hand and one around her back, lightly. Once they were on the dance floor, he gripped Emily by one hand and one around her back, only lightly pressing against her wings as he started to dance. She pretty much stared at her feet, trying to move with him. But even when she was a little slow, he had the strength to easily push her leg back, or pull her with him. She wasn't having the easiest of times with it, but so far Billy Bob was capable enough to keep them moving. At times he would whisper to her to mirror or copy, and she tried her best to work with the steps that she was going through, moving their legs between and around one another. The slower tempo made her feel like she was doing pretty well. But at the end, it picked up, with more focus, and she had to move quickly. She was getting excited at being in a dance like this. Her life had been all about diplomacy and secrecy, really. She wasn't the kind to be in the spotlight, but here she was out in the middle of a crowd where everyone was cheering her on. She wasn't flying, but it almost felt like her spirit was. Right up until Billy Bob brought her back to reality. I'm going to spin you. Beneath her mask, her eyes. Good morning, Right Brain. Thank you very much for the sticker. It is very much appreciated. Hope you're having a great day. Beneath her mask, her eyes. Beneath her mask, her eyes went wide as the human pulled on one of her arms and spun her around. The room blurred, and then she tripped, and as she fell, he caught her with one arm, raising the other as the crowd cheered. They stayed off to the side as Emily tried to get her bearings back, a little stunned still from what Billy Bob had done. It had been exciting and nerve-wracking and stressful, but also fun. She'd have to see if Billy Bob could teach her how to dance sometime, just for fun. For his part, he had been eyeing the massive trophy on the side of the room. He wanted to win so bad that he could taste it. He might have to teach Emily how to dance in case this ever happened again. He'd need her to be a bit more confident if he was going to secure his victory with better competitors. Then they watched two fellas emerge. One was wearing some sort of giant poofy dress, while the other had some strange suit on. "The fuck?" Billy Bob was muttering as the song, Well, I'm ever class high society, God's gift to ballroom notoriety. And they started to dance in a strange, somewhat stiff series of steps as Billy Bob's jaw dropped. They're ballroom dancing to big balls. He was in shock, but Emily didn't understand why he seemed so shocked. It was a song singing about some sort of dance meeting called a ball. She didn't get it. Once the song was over, the crowd cheered as well, since the Phyllis had done a decent job of it. The judges stood, and then Billy Bob shook his head. While we feel the dance itself of Billy Bob and guest was superior, the tie goes to the Phyllis for having costumes in accordance with the rules. What? That's bullcrap! Billy Bob was roaring as the Phyllis cheered out. Billy Bob stalked forward as Emily groaned, You didn't say nothing about a tiebreaker. I got costumes for the other sets. The judges just stood before the angry human, not seeming worried. The rules state the points will be awarded for keeping costumes according to the song set. Your last piece had no costumes. Yeah, but I should have won anyway. Your dances were better, but solo acts also get less. Such crap. You know what I think of your rules? He asked as he crossed his arms. The judges just looked up at him as he then jumped over their table, making them cast out as he grabbed the large golden trophy behind him. It was massive, with several tiers to it. She forgot how strong he was, and he just hoisted it in the air, above his head with both hands. I think I win anyway. Emily, book it. He jumped past the crowd as people scattered, and armored guards chased after him. The diplomat blinked and quickly let her wings flap as she jumped up and began to fly after the human, holding the trophy over his head, running and jumping for his ship. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. Oh, thank you very much, Fork Cartel. Very much appreciated. Very, very much appreciated. Stop doing that. That's very awesome of you. Big stretch. Coffee. $4060. And that was quite a bit longer than I expected. Choshta, good morning, afternoon, whatever it may be for you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the content. Also, hope you're having an amazing day. As much of a day, amazing day, as you can. That one was a lot chunkier than I thought, but hopefully this one isn't as well. Reddit used to have much shorter post lengths, so 4149. Okay. A lot longer. Okay, so it looks like we'll only get through 4 chapters of Buddy Bob today. No, that's fine, that's fine. I'm just going to pop off quickly. I'll be right back. Not pop off, but step away momentarily. I will give you music and chair. Back. All right. Some hydration. Some real hydration. Water. Blech. Not a huge water fan. But we must do what we must do. Okay. On to the next chapter. No, I forgot to do the thing. So, not yet. It should be 36 chapters total. With Billy Bob. I think 36 or 37. So we're halfway, roughly. Ooh, excuse me. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Alrighty, moving on to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker and is part of a series. There is a playlist listed down below in the description. There is a If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 18. President Cross was in the dodecahedron once more, and with the way things were shaping up, he'd be spending a lot of time in the military command center. This was why they'd built the rest of the dodecahedron under the old Pentagon. From the outside, it looked the same, but now they had a shell of a lot more space underground. The old joke had been that Washington was an iceberg, with only a fraction of the city being above ground. Now, it was especially true. Besides the dodecahedron, there was the White House 2.0, Basement Congress, the Smithsonian Emergency Patriotic Museum, and the Nixon Presidential Monument. It had it constructed in secret back in the 1970s. Every time a president ordered it taken apart, the workers would start dying in very mysterious circumstances. And eventually, everyone figured it was easier just to leave Nixon's ghost alone. It had been ages since President had to worry about a full-scale war. They just dealt with small burdens. It had been ages since a president had to worry about a full-scale war. They just had to deal with border skirmishes, where they send out a carrier group and bomb deep xenosystems to get them to bugger off. In general, there weren't too many disputes anymore. Humans liked high-gravity planets, and did just fine on death worlds. That, and they fought far more ferociously than any other intelligent species. Cross smiled as he thought about the time the Forlorn Consortium tried to conquer an outlying mineral-rich system. They'd used their smaller destroyers and cruisers to screen the system, while 2 dreadnoughts and a few support ships were left to seize the orbital factory. While 2 dreadnoughts and a few support ships were left to seize the orbital factories and the system's asteroid belt. What had happened were the workers, armed with nothing more than welding torches and mining tools, jumped from the asteroids to swarm over the hulls of the ships. The forlorn admiral had sent a panicked message screaming about humans swarming the hull before the bridge was cracked, and he got sucked out into space with his command staff. By the time the screening fleet pulled back to try and deal with the workers, they found that the humans had secured the dreadnought's guns to asteroids as makeshift orbital platforms. The rest of the fleet simply surrendered. The ancient navy didn't even have time to respond before the war had started and finished in a day. Most of the time, the best deterrent against Xeno incursion was the average American. They carried guns, lived on shitty planets, and if told that someone wanted to take their shitty land, they'd fight tooth and nail over it. Of course, once Americas had settled a planet enough to make a comfy and pet psychiatrist became a profession. Of course, once Americans had settled the planet enough to make a comfy and pet psychiatrist became a profession, and there were cookie-cutter coffee shops everywhere, they'd pack up and move on to the next shitty planet. And planet. Where they could be rednecks in peace. The first thing any American colonist on a new world did was create the largest, most ridiculous vehicle to get around comfortably on the planet. Rock buggies, super swamp sliders, mash and monster trucks. Cross's favorites were the lava gliders from Texas, too, sometimes referred to as Satan's arsehole. Indeed, there was very little overlap between human colonies and Xenos who wanted to steal them. It was mostly about mineral systems and FTL junctions, which was why no one had fought humans on the ground yet. It seemed like that was all going to change, however, as the president listened to the tail end of another intel report. So these spacecrafts are really going ahead with us? The intel officer nodded. Yes, sir. We continue to intercept fleet orders and transmissions to their commandos to start raiding and capturing humans. As far as we can tell, they're going to try and hold civvies hostage to get the trucker to surrender to the diplomat. Have they even asked us for our stance on the whole situation? No. President Cross snorted at that. All this time, all the galactic government ever did was tell us not to wipe anyone else out and keep our wars small. Now their secret police arseholes are ready to kidnap colonists and hold them hostage with all the actions of one... Now their secret police arseholes are ready to kidnap colonists and hold them hostage because of the actions of one American. Director Ripper gave President Cross a heebie-jeebies, especially since he was in charge of the CIA. He had those super blue eyes that looked dead somehow, and always reminded him, always reminded the president of one of those bad guys in the movies who would cook up body parts and toss them in a salad. Even so, he was one of the best directors Cross had ever seen. And despite never wanting to go fishing with the guy, the president trusted his judgment. So when he spoke, Cross listened. As you know, human construction crews have been awarded all FTL Gate and FTL Combuoy contracts in near space. We haven't had a chance to work on the core systems, but we're confident that everything around us is taken care of. Yeah, so we've got all their communications. What's the deal with the gates? Theoretically, we could reverse the flow of the gates and crush everything traveling on the FTL lanes at that moment. But, we're really not sure how well that would work out. Plus, it's not specific. We'd cross everything. Civilian and military. Cross nodded at that. All right. Well, as soon as we confirm reports of the space crab attack, start bombing the crap out of the core systems. If If it's possible just to shut down the FTL gate and strand their fleet, we should try it. If it looks like we'd be hitting a low civil traffic... If it looks like... If it looks like... If it looks possible to... If it looks like we'd be hitting a lot of civil traffic and stranding them as well, then forget it. How bad is this going to be? This is their secret police, after all. Ripon nodded at that. Yes, but that's their folly. They're used to small commando raids against pirates and specific threats. They haven't engaged in wholesale wars since their conflict with the new allies. They haven't engaged in wholesale wars since the conflict with our new allies. Yeah. Speaking of that, weren't they waiting to hear about the success of their diplomat and our space trucker? For the ceremony, yes, but they're forging ahead with the actual mechanics of our new alliance. What are we looking at? What are we looking at for blowback? Total war with the rest of the galaxy. The room got quiet as the assembled officers, Congress people, experts, and of course Governor Dundee stared at the CIA director. It's against the treaty that we're forced to sign at the end of the war I mentioned. Forming an alliance with them basically restarts it, and they're not nearly as strong now as they were when that war started. The few allies they had abandoned them during the fighting, and while they still have formidable intel services, the commandos they've got virtually no ground troops. Commandos they've got virtually no ground troops or navy. Cross rubbed his chin. For the rest of the galaxy attacked the UHG-2. That's unclear at this point. We've very explicitly stated that this is an alliance between America and the Libertonians, not the UHG. But the space crabs are targeting their colonies already. Yeah, but all American colonies are unofficial, that's the point. We give the UHG the good planets and let them do things by the book. We take the shithole so no one bothers us. Until we fix them up enough for the UHG to move in, that is. The space crabs likely don't know that we've got people out there. They're just attacking what they know is human. He sighed and shook his head. Try and make it extra clear this is Americans, not normal humans. See if we can spare the rest. Otherwise, mobilize everything. Call up our reserves. America is going to war. The rest of the room was nodding in agreement. They'd be ready for the official declaration. Sir, one of the admirals spoke up, we need to get a carrier. We've got a carrier group poised to hit the crabs at home. It's tradition for the president to name the first strike operation. President Cross smiled. There was only one option. We're going to call it Operation Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Billy Bob. Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Emily groaned as she sat on the crate Billy Bob had set up for her next to the ship. The weight of this planet was intense for her, even though she knew it wasn't even normal for Billy Bob. After escaping with the trophy, they'd taken off and driven through 2 of her sleep cycles before he'd pulled out the FTL lane to land on an uninhabited planet. He wanted to give their new pet a chance to stretch its legs. The problem for her was how heavy the gravity was. She'd insisted on joining him outside in the blue light of the planet's sun. The light gave everything an odd tint, but most of the plains and foliage looked green to her. She was resting on a crate, since just breathing was a bit of a strain for her. Billy Bob was tossing that large fake bone in the air, and Stomper, the name chosen for it, would chase it down, pick it up, and run it back. Then they would stomp on the ground in front of him, hence the name, until he wrestled it down and took the toy back before throwing it again. She couldn't believe the confidence he showed with the animal. His body language was perfect for maintaining control over the creature. Was he trained in it, or was this another strangely innate ability humans seemed to possess? Most species had considerable difficulty domesticating creatures. Maybe it had to do with being omnivores. She was aware that they had some sort of species of meat animal that was so docile that they could just walk them into a house for slaughter, which if her translator was correct, was a rather awful name, even if it was descriptive. Not tea, but coffee. It doth flow. It was descriptive. It also informed her that the creatures leaving were in rainbow-coloured, which gave him no shortage of amusement. He'd also informed her that the creatures' leavings were rainbow-coloured, which gave him no shortage of amusement. He'd insisted she come take a look, but even if the gravity wasn't so intense, she'd have skipped out on the offer. It seemed like Stomper had been happy with the toys and bed they bought for him. Well, that she'd bought for him upon Billy Bob's begging. She had no idea what they'd do when it was fully grown, however. Then she blinked a little at the thought. She was only supposed to be with Billy Bob for another few galactic weeks. That wasn't nearly enough time for Stomper to grow significantly. The diplomat blinked slowly in the heavy gravity as she thought about that. They'd only been traveling around for a standard galactic week, and she was already thinking as if it was going to be traveling together for years, not just weeks. Besides, not being sure how Billy Bob felt wasn't even... Besides, not being sure how Billy Bob felt, she wasn't even all that sure that she'd survive more than a few weeks. By now, the Crusticans had to be aware that she had a copy of their suppression device and planned on unveiling it in the council meeting. They hadn't been able to track Billy Bob, it seemed, but that was likely because he was refueling at black market stations now and slept next to FTL lanes in deep space instead of any sane species who'd stop in inhabited systems. They might be set upon by Crustican hunter-killers at any moment. Even if he'd taken out the first squad with surprising ease, they hadn't been expecting resistance. She couldn't believe how lucky she was to have met him at that moment. Maybe she'd have taken him a few detours. Maybe she'd have him take a few detours on their way to the capital. She'd first be worried about making it in time, but with the way he drove, speed wasn't a problem. Her handlers had messaged her through the comm buoys to let her know that the Crusticans would... Her handlers had messaged her through the comm buoys to let her know the Crusticans might be moving against the Americans. She didn't know if she should tell Billy Bob or not. It wasn't like he could stop them from attacking his people. But he wanted to know. She was racked with guilt and worry about what she was getting him mixed up into. As she watched him toss the toy to Stomper, she wondered what was going through his head. This is fucking awesome! A six-legged space box that's going to become as big as a horse that he could ride. He was excited, and of course, as he played fetch with Stomper, all he could think about was how awesome it would be to ride around a space box. He still hadn't figured out the satisfying name for the species, but he didn't give a crap about that anymore. He would grab Stomper's tail and wag it around, and then Stomper would stomp around and with it. He would grab Stomper's tail and wag it around, and then Stomper would stomp around with his tongue hanging out, head in the air. The thing even purred. He had a purring space fox. Fucking awesome! Fucking awesome! And it shat rainbows, rainbow-colored turds. But that was hilarious. He had to tell Ted, and probably Ivan, and while he was at it, he should probably tell Paco Taco as well. They'd get the word out. The only problem was that he was only a trucker this far into xenospace. He had the deepest 99 of all. He didn't think any humans had even made it this far, let alone all the way into the capital. He was having fun with Stomper, but when he looked over and saw Emily lounging on the crate, he realized that he should pack it up. So he chucked the bone as hard as he could and let Stomper really chase after it before walking over to the back of the ship. When the space box returned, he smiled and wrestled around with it for a moment before leading it up into the back of the ship. He made sure Stomper had water, and he'd cooked. He made sure Stomper had water, and he cooked and some meat. He made sure Stomper had some water. He'd cooked some meat up, mashing it into beer. He made sure Stomper had water, and he cooked and some of the meat. He made sure Stomper had water, and he cooked some of the meat up, mashing it into mashing it to make sure his new pet didn't have any troubles with it before walking back out and closing the cargo ramp behind him. He walked back up along to his ship to Emily. He walked back up along his ship to Emily, who was trying to push herself up from her lounging position on the crate, but struggling to do that. "This gravity," she gasped out. Betty Bob just smiled and reached down and picked her up off the crate. She was heavier than when he She was heavier than when he tangoed. She was heavier than when they tangoed, but he could manage it just fine. He had to be careful to cradle her and he had to be careful to cradle her under her knees and along her upper back, so he couldn't put too much pressure on her wings. He didn't mind. After all, she was being a good sport about letting him play with Stomper. Once he was back through the airlock and the gravity returned to standard for her, she didn't leave his hold just yet. "I'm still kind of sore. Mind setting me on the bed?" she asked, and he shrugged, obviously not minding carrying her a little further. She looked up at him, a flood of various emotions washing over her before she leaned up, nuzzling her pointed beak like a muzzle under her beard and giving a nip. What she couldn't see, due to his beard, was the vein beneath it. His eyes went wide, and she frowned as she tasted something awfully metallic, before red began to pour down his throat. She leaned back in his arms before he gasped, dropping her as he collapsed to his knees, clutching his throat as red began to seep from his fingers. She gasped out, wide-eyed, as she jumped up. "Oh, shit! Oh, merciful deity! What did I do, Betty Bob?" He just gurgled a little as he clutched the hole, and she ran in a panic. "What did I do? How do I fix it?" Mittens was sitting up on the bed, looking between them as the cat wondered what the commotion was about. She remembered the biogel and quickly yanked it open. She remembered the biogel and quickly yanked open the cupboard he'd put the bottles in. She frantically ran back, kneeling next to him, with She frantically ran back, kneeling next to him while unfastening the top. She was so nervous the purple gel spilled out a bit onto his side as she poured more out, rubbing it on and around the hand he had clutching his throat. She then poured out more into a cap, which she shoved into his mouth. He opened his lips a bit to try and force the liquid down before his breathing began to return to normal. She sat next to him, looking worried and nervous until he slowly pulled his hand from his throat. His hand had quite a bit of red along it, as did his throat and the tip of his shirt. His hand had quite a bit of red along it, as did his throat and the top of his shirt. He gasped a little and stayed on his knees for a moment as Emily stared at him, wide-eyed. Then he looked over at her. "What the feck?" "I'm sorry. I'm super sorry, really. I didn't mean for that to happen. I had no idea it would. You always seem so tough. He was looking down at his hands for a moment and then back up at her. She could see the confusion in his face. "It's how my people show affection. By trying to rip out the karate artery." She frowned at that. "Your martial arts artery? No, fuck. Carotid. Whatever. The thing that guides blood to my brain. I fucking need that." "I'm sorry. My people's anatomy is different." "Oh, really? The completely different size." Oh, really? The completely different species has critical life-needing stuff in other places. Jesus." He rubbed his hands along his throat again and shakily stood up, wobbling a bit before walking into the bathroom. She sat on the floor still, trying to calm down still, and remembering to reseal the biogel bottle. She heard him scrubbing his hands with some sort of cleaner. "The hell was that about, Emily? I take it you're... The hell was that about, Emily? I take it from your reaction you weren't actually trying to kill me?" "No, I'm sorry. I was just,
You were carrying me, and I felt comfortable, and I felt, I don't know. I wanted to show some affection.
By ripping my throat out?
That's not what I thought would happen. I was caught up in the moment. I'm sorry.
You don't seem... You don't seem that distraught. You aren't even crying.
He stepped out of the bathroom, rubbing his hands hard as the cleaning Joe and Ginger. From rubbing his...
You aren't even crying.
He stepped out of the bathroom, rubbing his hands hard with a cleaning gel, while she looked up at him, and he noticed the moisture in her eyes and along her cheeks. She just wasn't sobbing like a human might.
Crap. Never mind, Feck, you obviously didn't want that to happen, so apology accepted. It's just, stressful trying to hold my blood in so I don't fucking die.
He shook his head for a moment as she looked down and away from him. He sighed out and turned back to the bathroom, finally turning on the water to wash off the last of the cleaning gel, now that his hands were clean.
For my people, that part of the neck is rather leathery under our feathers.
For my people, that part of the neck is rather leathery under our feathers, so we show affection by nipping at it when the other person has it exposed to us.
I exposed it to you?
Well, you were carrying me in your arms, and I didn't think it through. I'm really sorry, Billy Bob. We had that dance, and she got quiet as she dried. She got quiet as he dried his hands off. Looking over at her for a minute, he didn't seem to know what to do, so he didn't say anything. He walked back up to the ship. He walked back out of the ship, picking up the crate that he'd set out for her earlier and stowing it away in the cargo bay, giving Stomper another pet as he walked through. Then he opened the door to his cabin. She had put the biogel away and was sitting in the co-pilot's chair, seeming closed in, trying to take up very little space. He still wasn't totally sure what to say, so he climbed into the pilot's chair, started up the Longhorn to let it warm up before takeoff. They were quiet as he took them back into space, heading to the nearest FTL lane to get going again. Finally, he broke the silence.
So, that's affection, huh?
Billy Bob.
Hey, it's okay. I survived. It's just a little cut. I probably overreacted. It was just, unexpected.
I'm really sorry.
I got that. It was just a mistake. A little misunderstanding between different species. A little misunderstanding between two different species. It's okay, since I didn't actually die. She still looked a little worried, and obviously regretful that she'd hurt him like that. For his own part, he wasn't sure what sort of affection she was talking about. Like, affection? He saved that question, though, not sure that he was ready to tickle it. That is definitely not the right way to say that. Greeting. He saved that. He saved that question, though, not sure that he was ready to tackle it. So, you like that dance, huh? The tango. I didn't think about it too much. I was, focused on winning.
Were you? It just seemed so intimate. I thought, well, she trailed off. Maybe you could teach me how to dance sometime?
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll need you to get some practice if we hope to really win next time. Your form is a bit sloppy, and you stare at your feet way too much. You need to be more aware of your body.
He stared at it. She stared at him as he glanced over.
Hey, it's the truth.
I meant dancing for fun.
Fun? Listen, Emily, let me tell you what my dad told me just before my first Little League baseball game. It's not about trying your hardest. What matters is that you win. What matters is if you win.
Your father did not tell you that.
I'm not kidding. After we lost the game over which I had no real control, 'cause I was, young, we stood out in the parking lot, and he pointed out the other kids getting into vehicles with their families. He told me, all these other kids are going to get pizza with their families to either lessen the sting of defeat or make victory all the more sweet. And do you know where we're going, Billy Bob?
And I asked if we were going to get pizza, and he said, "No, we're going home and eating what your mother's..." We're going home and eating what your mother feels like making with as little prep as possible. And that's just what we did. Emily was staring at Billy Bob, open-mouthed with shock. That was your father? Billy Bob nodded. So, you know what happened at the next Little League game? I told my team that if we lost, I was going to start kicking them in the balls, even if they had cups on to protect it. It still hurt. And you know what? We won. And my dad told me that he was extremely proud of me. So, I kind of have a thing about winning. If I can't win by the rules of the game everyone else is playing, I have to change the rules and win by my own game. I have to change the rules and win my own game. But you have fun constantly. You're the most insane, fun-loving creature I've ever met. Yeah, because that's the game I play most of the time. That's part of why I became a space trucker. The only real rules I had to follow were delivering crap to the right place and the right time. I kick ass at that, which leaves me free to just have fun doing whatever the feck I want. But when I'm dancing, that's a competition. And I gotta win, so. If you want me to teach you to dance, I can. And I'll try not to get my competitive mindset. But no promises. She thought it over for a moment. All right. I'll take whatever teaching you're willing to give. But no more neck biting. No more neck biting. I said I was sorry. I know. And I'm okay. So long as we're clear. Don't try and kill me again. He smiled as she began to realize that this was just his behavior. Well, not by biting your neck. Your blood tastes awful. Oh, does it? Well, that's good to know. In case we are in a fight, I'll try to bleed in your mouth. I'm sure that's a good strategy. I'm sure that's a good strategy. I'm sure that... No. Whistling. I'm sure... Good night, Vengeful. I hope you have a good one. Bleed in your mouth. I'm sure that's a good strategy. She giggled a little, finally starting to relax a bit, now that she realized Billy Bob was really okay. Yeah, try that on flying... Yeah, try that on a flying predator. I'm sure you'll do well. Yeah, I'm not too worried about that, Bird Brain. Bird Brain? What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Let's just get some music going. He turned his music back on as they shifted into FTL Lane, flying on towards the capital. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker. Coffee. Big stretch. Dog's playing silly buggers. Not in his normal sleeping spot, but I can still hear it snoring. Tickety-tack, tickety-tack. Tickety-tack. Alright, moving on to chapter 19. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 19. Cast leader Cleroy was stressed. His green hydrating mucus was grey. His shell was cracking in a few places. And if the juveniles weren't so similarly troubled, he'd fear they might try and devour him in his sleep and take his place. The matriarch had been bearing over them so much that he could swear that he felt her standing over him even now. They were scouring every intel source they had, hidden cameras, listening devices, informants, and even bar rumors. Cleroy was confident the matriarch would crack him open and suck out his insides, should he fail to have some information with his next report. His eyes scanned over more documents that were being brought into the control room by the juveniles, and they each had their own stack to pore over. Then he saw it. His claw tapped on a data slate. "This! Who brought this in?" He quickly flagged the report, and one of the juveniles skittered forward. "When? Where?" The Phyllis complaint about the Cultural Dance Center. 2 Phyllis squads entered an illegal black market station run by banketeers to compete in some sort of regional dance competition. One squad won, but a pair of unknown species stole the trophy. They submitted a complaint, hoping that we might track them down. They were off duty, but on an illegal station competing in an unregistered event. I thought we'd just reprimand them for wasting our time, but you said to bring in all reports regarding unknown species. Yes. But when did we get this report? One standard sleep cycle ago, cast leader. Cleroy glittered out. Cleroy chittered out and quickly input the coordinates into his console. The station wasn't too far from an FTL lane, which was normal. He quickly traced a path between that station and the other they'd staked out, only to find their prey had escaped. They had to be heading towards the core. They'd traveled away from the core for a while, but were now starting to veer inwards. Very cunning of them, but now he had a route. Cleroy pulled a map back up from the coordinates, traveling forward along the FTL lanes, searching for some sort of target or point he thought they would stop at next. Then his eyes widened for a moment, and he smacked the console with his claw. "Here! We'll focus all our regional hunter-killers here. We'll focus all our regional hunter-killers here." The juveniles clustered around and then looked up at him in confusion. "Cast leader, a museum?" Cleroy hissed and clicked at the juveniles, quickly skittering away before he... Cleroy hissed and clicked as the juveniles quickly skidded away before he cut one of them open. "Yes, the terrorist diplomat will strike there. It has an exhibit on the regulation walls. This is the start of a new war they'll spark with their treachery. There is no doubt she'll want to attack it with their new bloody thirsty mercenary. There is no doubt she'll want to attack it with a new bloodthirsty mercenary." Cleroy moved with purpose, scurrying to the communications terminal. He shoved the juvenile out of the way, typing on the console with his forenames. "We need to send out a warning to the museum security. They must be on alert for the Libertonian." "Should we have them close the museum?" "No! In fact," his claws paused on the console. "Never mind, we won't warn them." He began to type once more. "We'll instruct all hunter-killers in the area to converge as we move there ourselves. We should make it in another cycle. We'll wait for them to strike and then capture them." "Should I awake cast leader Bleeblob?" "No. His quest for revenge is driving him blue. He's like a gleamer chaser who wandered out into deep space for too long. He's like a gleamer chaser who wandered out into deep for too long. He's like a gleamer chaser who's wandered out into the deep for too long. This has to be done efficiently. We need to capture the Libertonian, and either capture or kill Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Billy. Billy Bob. Emily had been able to relax a bit more after nearly killing Billy Bob, which had been about as traumatic for her as it was for him, even though he kept making fun of her over it. That was just how he dealt with almost dying, it seemed. But as they drove along the FTL lane, his navcom pinged with info on the upcoming system. Mostly they ignored it now, since they didn't need the standard refueling stations. But as she read it over, she noticed one of the attractions and gasped out, "Billy Bob, we have to stop up ahead." He jerked a bit, looking up and around for a moment at the traffic. "What? Oh, sorry, not like in the FTL lane. I mean, in the system."
"Hey, why? What's up?"
"There's a museum up ahead with a collection of art I've always wanted to see. They have paintings and sculptures and very small vistas and all sorts of things."
"The hell is a small vista?"
"A smell vista, not a small vista. And all sorts. They have paintings. They have paintings and sculptures and smell vistas and all sorts of things."
"The hell is a smell vista? And there is no way I'm going to a museum about Xeno art. Count me out."
"You need to get some culture that isn't human. Besides, you promised that if I let you complete the next dance tournament, that you'd do what I wanted to the next system." The next dance tournament. "You need to get some..." "You need to get some culture that isn't human. Besides, you promised if I let you compete in the dance tournament that you'd do what I wanted in the next system." Billy Bob opened and closed his mouth a few times before shutting it firmly and thinking back on what he said.
"God damn it, I didn't mean a museum. I meant like something I also wanted to do, but was your idea."
She just stared at him from the co-pilot's seat, and he groaned for a good 30 seconds while looking up at the roof of his cabin.
Fine.
He let out a happy... She let out a happy chirp and helped her. She let out a happy chirp and held up one hand. He looked over at her, confused for a moment before realizing what she wanted.
"I'm not giving you a high five."
"What? Yes, you are. Museums are high-five worthy."
"No, they're not. Except for maybe a video game museum or a war museum."
"I'm sure they've got war stuff there.
It's a big place, yeah. But you want to see some smell vistas.
And other stuff." She looked at him hard, still... She looked at him... She looked at his hand, still in the air. She looked at him, hand still in the air. "Billy Bob,
I'm not going to do that."
"Yes, you are," she said with a force as she growled out. He groaned and then raised his hand, which she quickly slapped and giggled with excitement. "This is so fun. I've always wanted to go here. Don't worry about it. What could go wrong at a museum?"
"I'll get so bored I kill myself,"
he said grumpily before she started punching his shoulder. "Shut up. You're going to enjoy this. I know it."
Okay, geez, stop already."
He leaned away from her punching with a laugh.
"You're a lot more active now that you've tried to murder me. I think my blood energized you."
"Ugh, that's disgusting. It's just because now I could see... It's just because now I could... It's just because now I know I could totally take you in a fight."
"Bring it on, hollow bones."
"I'm not an earth bird. My bones aren't hollow. You should be careful, or I might take my gloves off." She chuckled. He chuckled at that as she wiggled her 4 hands at him. Now that he thought about it, he'd never seen more than her face and wings. That cloak, survival suit thing covered her body. Either they didn't need to bathe much, or... Either they didn't bathe much, or they... Either they didn't bathe much. Either they didn't bathe much. Either they didn't need to bathe much, or it also helped clean her feathers. Yeah. You should totally learn more about her species at some point. He shrugged it off as he began to downspin his engines and move through the FTL lane to get ready to exit the system near this museum that she wanted to see. Unlike his normal stops that he had to actually start weaving through to the regular Xeno traffic on his way to the planet, most of the Atlas cargo ships were heading to a different port, so he was mostly moving around smaller vessels carrying tourists and private yachts owned by wealthy families. The Xenos seemed to favor curving, asymmetrical shapes for their ships, as opposed to Billy Bob's blocky and very efficient Longhorn. He didn't care for the Xenos' design. They were all from no function. They were wasteful of materials, and in general looked ready to snap at any decent gravity. In fact, now that he thought about it, it was like being in an actual ship flying into an anime. It was like being in an actual ship flying into an anime. Next thing you'd see is a bunch of giant mechs sword fighting when none of the soldiers knew how to lead. Next thing you'd see was a bunch of giant mechs sword fighting when none of the soldiers knew how to lead the target. Then he thought back on his fight on the station. Perhaps no Xeno soldiers did know how to lead a target. He shrugged it off as he focused on finding the designated lanes leading down. He shrugged it off as he focused on finding the designated lanes leading down to the correct spaceport. What species is here? What's the species here like? He asked as he glanced over at Emily. This is a Pulvian planet, one of the founding species of the galactic government. Wealthy, high-class, high society standing. They make up the majority of bureaucrats in the galactic government by a large percentage. They're fairly weak physically, but very culturally adept. Around the same height as an average Libertonian, so smaller than me by a few inches. They're sticklers for rules and order, aside from art, of course. You're shorter than average Libertonian? You didn't know that? She stared at him. He stared at her for a moment before she realized why. Right, I'm the only Libertonian you've ever met. Well, I am, but only by a few inches. So, it's not that bad. I'm not like a dwarf flyer. What's that? Sounds pretty cool. They're just Libertonians who only... What's that? What's that? Sounds pretty cool. They're just Libertonians who are only around 5.5 feet tall. Genetic disorder. They're very nimble flyers, so they were able to survive in our pre-civilized period. We have dwarfs too. They survive because we like laughing at them. Wow. I just realized what dicks we can be as a species. He shrugged it off. There was a chime as they hailed... There was a chime as they were hailed by the traffic control. Unidentified cargo holder, you are entering the wrong spaceport traffic lane. This is for tourist and private vehicle traffic only. That's a 410, good buddy. This here is a private transport, with a pilot and co-pilot only. We must have switched wires somewhere. Our destination is... He began making noises with his mouth. It sounded like some sort of garbled transmission. Please hold your heading while... please hold your heading while we, verify. Billy Bob grinned at Emily. Crap ground control, I've got an exotic... Crap ground control. I've got an exotic newly discovered animal for the museum. The curator is expecting us down there as fast as we can fall out of the sky. You really gonna hold me up here because your tech is busted? You get that, sir. You get to sit nice and comfy while I get chewed out for your mistakes. I don't need the scrap today. I want your control number. The curator craps on me. The curator craps on me, and I'll make sure he hits on you too. See how you like it when the important people breathe down your neck. Well, you're clear for the private museum, Docker. They're safe flying. Thank you. That wasn't so hard now, was it? Tell you what, if things do go well, I'll let them know you helped. You have a nice day. Billy Bob ended the transmission as he chuckled. God, Xenos are so easy to bullshit. So few actually want to deal with the angry space trucker with the delivery. Emily was smiling as he pulled out of the main spaceport lane and followed the directions now being displayed on his window. The planet beneath them seemed to be full of greens and whites. The cities were very densely packed, as usual, with most Xeno settlements he'd seen. They'd liked to have few really huge cities on their developed worlds. Most of their colonies were homes clustered together with fields stretching out around them. They very rarely liked to live far apart from one another. He brought his longhorn down into a designated docking area behind the museum. The structures themselves were massive works of white stone, but to him they looked more like a mold colony stretching up. But to him they looked more like a mold colony, stretching and blobbing on. But to him they looked more like a mold colony, stretching and blobbing out in weird ways. Very organic, with almost no right angles or symmetry to their structure. Much like the ships that looked like it would fall apart in Earth gravity. He didn't like it. There were only a few small yachts here. There were only a few small yachts back here, no cargo haulers like his, but he could see what had to be the Pulvian with a data slate walking towards him. He had an important decision to make here as he tapped his chin, deep in thought. Space Poodle. That was it. They had fluffy fur. That was it. They had Space Poodle. That was it. They had fluffy furry sections along their lanky body. No tail, but a pointed nose that curved up, and already struck him as being stuck-up snobs. They were mostly humanoid pointed faces, long neck into the lanky body and arms. Their torso almost looked too small for their height. This one had blue tufts of tightly curled fur on its head, midsection, and in two different spots on both arms and legs. The feet ending in tall three-toed feet. The rest of it covered in a yellowish-grey fabric that looked sort of like a jumpsuit with holes in it for the fur to stick through. He looked over to Emily. Okay, follow my lead, and act aloof. They exited his ship, and he waved for her. They exited his ship as he waved for her to wait near the entrance. She crossed both sets of arms as he approached the Pulvian. No, this simply won't do. Where's the welcoming committee? No, this simply won't do. Where's the welcoming committee? I don't see the flowers or the carpet or any of it. The museum employee halted at that and looked confused. Pardon? You can't be the only person they sent to welcome her. It's just unacceptable. I need to talk to whoever is in charge of these things. She can't be subjected to such basic treatment. The Pulvian looked down at the data slate and spoke again. I thought you were a cargo hauler. What? This a cargo hauler? I'll have you know this is the latest fashion in luxury from the outer systems. It's not about how it looks, but what it carries. He nodded slowly and pointed at the Pulvian. What's your name? I'm going to make it very clear to the curator that you're being very unhelpful in welcoming our newest artist. Make it very clear that you're being very unhelpful in welcoming your newest artist. Bring in enough work for a new wing, and they don't even know who made it. Wait. Who are you talking about? You don't even know. It's Princess Cinnabuns, the newly discovered... the newly discovered artsy-fartsies. The Galactic Council is fast-tracking their membership due to their art and culture advancements. Why do you think we're here in the outer ship system? And she has me as a servant. Have you ever seen my kind before? No. And here I am in a ship that you've never seen before, in your private dock for the museum. You think we came here by accident? I think there's been a mix-up. I wasn't told of any of this. I'm sorry. Oh, I see. Blaming someone else, are you? Yes. No. Betty Bomb walked back to Emily and very quietly said, I'm just going to pretend that we're discussing something. Look agitated, or as much as you can with that mask on. Emily huffed, sticking her head in the air as she moved her hands around in an animated fashion. Is this really going to work? Then he nodded and walked back to the Pulvian, slowly wrapping an arm around to pull it away from Emily. The princess isn't happy, but I think I can make her see the opportunity here. If no one knows that we're here, we can take a look at the layout on our own before people know who we are. Why don't you just give us 2 all-access passes, and I'll calm her down. You don't talk about her arrival to anyone, and we'll walk through. And then I'll call up to make sure that they have a welcoming committee waiting for her in a cycle or two. Okay? The Pulvian shook his head in a circle-like pattern that his translator told him was the same as nodding. Here! They quickly tapped on the data slate and pulled 2 little black pebbles out of the pocket, handing them to Billy Bob. Please let the princess know that we didn't intend in insulting her. We're thrilled to have her art here at our museum. Please enjoy yourselves. Those are special VIP passes, any exhibit, as long as you like. Billy Bob nodded and gave the creature a very light pat. I appreciate it. Remember, don't tell anyone, or I'm going to have a very different story for your superiors. Of course, absolute secrecy. Billy Bob smiled and walked back to Emily as the staffer scurried away. He handed her a pebble. Well, I doubt I'll like it, but at least it was fun getting into the place. She laughed at that and walked along with them as they headed through the private docking area, following the signs towards the main museum. It was set up as a series of indoor and outdoor exhibits, with opulent-looking gardens separating the large white buildings. Emily began to guide Billy Bob through the various gardens and exhibits, much like she had with her sculptors. Much like she had said, there were sculptures, art, and the smell vistas. It turned out the smell vistas were clumps of scented materials in front of a picture of a place to try and give the sense of being someplace else. Some were okay, but he insisted some smelled like unspecified Xeno ass. UXA. He actually liked the gardens best so far. Looking at Xeno modern art was rather underwhelming to him, and it was hard to appreciate the craftsmanship of the sculptures when he didn't know what the fuck any of it was supposed to be. As they wandered through the gardens, he pointed at the section where Greslin in the exosuit stood at the exit. As they wandered through the gardens, he pointed to a section where Greslin in an exosuit stood next to a display marked exotic and dangerous. Phyllis was wandering towards one of the plants, looking sort of stoned and mesmerized. The Greslin sprayed something in his face, and he shook it off and quickly walked away. See those plants with fangs? Venus flytraps. They're from Earth. They lure flies in and they snap around them and eat them. But you have a plant that eats meat? More than one, I'm fairly sure. It's a death world, after all. That's terrifying and interesting at the same time. Terrifying, he said, with a nod. Then he pointed to a tree in a glass dome. I forgot the name, but that's pretty much a totally toxic tree. Looks nice, kills anyone who sleeps under it. Emily couldn't believe Earth had so many plants that would harm creatures. Plants. And that didn't include the one that were simply poison. In fact, a majority of the exotic and dangerous plants were from Earth. From what Billy Bob was telling her, they didn't even have all the real dangerous plants that he could think of. But here they had at least 5. How could the planet house more than 5 dangerous plants? Billy Bob laughed when she asked that, and Billy Bob laughed when she asked that, and caused a bit of a scene with the Xeno stared at him. The way he laughed in a loud, boisterous manner was somewhat intimidating to the more peaceful species. It sounded menacing and predatory to the mostly herbivore species. They were moving on when they found an exhibit on pre-FTL species. He gasped and pointed to a picture that was guiding people to the exhibit. That's the Voyager! That's the Voyager! They found it! We went back to try and track it down with our jump drives, but never could locate it. They must have taken it during all the spying on our music. Well, it's unlikely that the Banktiers were involved with taking anything besides information. They listen to radio signals and watch species to see if they're likely to be good trade partners. It's illegal, of course, since the government doesn't want to risk early contact. But it's pretty easy to steal radio signals and the like without getting caught. Oh, well, whatever. It's the Voyager. He dragged her along, pointing and marveling at the artifacts that had various young species. But when they came to a section on humans was when he got really interested. His translator was playing the recorded message that was broadcast as he touched the various exhibits. This is Earth, supergravity death world with incredible levels of water. Many dangerous plants from this planet can be found in the exotic and dangerous plant exhibit outside. At the time most of the artifacts were found, the planet rests in a perpetual state of war. The species inhabiting it is brutish and simple-minded. He laughed. Two great clans are competing over control over what little land there is. They use missiles filled with uranium, plutonium, and hydrogen arranged in such a way as to split the atom in an uncontrolled fusion, which leads to massive radioactive explosions. This species is not expected to last more than 20 solar cycles. He laughed again. In accordance with standard galactic surveys, we have taken pictures of their society once every 50 solar cycles up until the time up until they launched their first object. Up until they first launched an object into space. After that, we surveyed once more, collected these artifacts, and left them in isolation. We plan on returning after 100 solar cycles to collect more artifacts from the radioactive remains of the decaying ruins. They either forgot to do that, or were disappointed. They either forgot to do that, or they were disappointed we aren't dead and pretend that we are, he said with a laugh, and then pointed. Those are pictures from old Earth. He began to look at the pictures of sailing ships and towns that had been taken. This has to be like the 1600s. They aren't close enough to really make out specifics, but still. He ran down the long corridor looking at pictures before stopping. Emily! She caught up with him, looking at the gray-cratered landscape, some sort of metal and foil contraption in the background, with a red, white, and blue flag in front of it. The caption below said, Landing site of first human moon mission. Then he gasped as he saw a sign pointed towards the artifacts. The first one said, First human object in space. Sputnik? How did they manage that? The exhibit was fairly empty, so he didn't have to worry about disturbing anyone as he walked into a large room and then gasped, No fracking way! Emily stepped in and looked up at some sort of pointed rocket with him. One on the server. Emily stepped in and looked up at the sun. Emily stepped in and looked up at some sort of pointed rocket with him. One with the side there was some sort of red field with a large white circle and some strange black squill on it. The Nodgies did beat everyone to space. Everyone figured there was no way. This is huge weight. But do I want to tell anyone? They were dicks. He looked at the remains they found on the ship. A dead pilot, a black uniform, black pressure suit, and a dead pilot. A dead pilot, a black uniform, black pressure suit that had failed. Some sort of gun. An MP-44 and ammo. Why the fact did he have that in space? Was he expecting to shoot space monsters? Oh, a real Luger. He was pressed against the glass as he looked. What? Who are the Nazis? Yes, I did mumble that. They were a bunch of non-Americans who hated Jews and gays and gypsies and everyone who wasn't really exactly like them. They were total dicks, but they were really good at engineers and fighters. They were really good engineers and fighters. They were sort of like those enemies you really, really hate, but kind of respect because they're so fucking tough, like Russians. But beer and engineering instead of vodka and general drunkenness. Did you guys have anyone like that? Oh, we're sort of that to the rest of the galaxy. No shit. Well, you don't genocide people, do you? What? No, not at all. We just believe in less regulation. I still don't get why that was war over that. I still don't get why there was a war over that. Then he finally walked down away from it to see a Voyager he'd first spotted the picture of. This was the first thing we made that made... This is the first thing we made that made it out of the system. He started reading what they knew about it and discovered something. They didn't find the record. How could they not? Jesus, that means it's still in there. He was pressing against the glass as well, staring at the Voyager. It's right there, Emily. The golden record. He looked around and then tapped the glass. Think it's got an alarm? Yes, I think it's got an alarm. Bah! This isn't over. I'm going to make them give me that record. That's part of humanity's history. It doesn't belong in a museum. Billy Bob, you can't just demand one of the museum pieces. Yes, I can. The lazy facts didn't even look into the Voyager and find it. He walked out of the exhibit, ignoring the artifacts from the other species, but then stopped as he saw a large, rather busy exhibit filled with tourists. The top was marked The Regulation Wars. Billy Bob stopped and Henry slowed stepped behind him. Billy Bob stopped, and Emily slowly stepped behind him, trying to take up as little space as possible. Billy Bob, let's go. I need to see this. It just doesn't make sense to me. He began to walk through the exhibit. There were artwork pieces on either side. The founding of the council, arse faces, space poodles, fleckos, some sort of space gerbil, the exosuit cops, the Libertonians. He couldn't help but notice the Libertonian was cast in a shadow and looked evil. Then there was a massive painting called Betrayal. Libertonians in strange suits were charging some sort of meeting, shooting the other species, setting fire to the buildings around them. One called The Fall, which showed the Libertonians in those suits falling from the sky as the other species looked heroic, shooting up at them. Shooting at them. Finally, there was Victory, which showed the other species standing on which showed the other species standing around two now suddenly small, bent and subdued Libertonians signing some sort of document. This tells me nothing, Billy Bob muttered, even as the tourists crowded around the wall-sized painting. He found a segment past it that actually seemed to have info. He started to read the history presented here. There was a disagreement over the council. The Libertonians thought that they should encourage species to aspire for greatness and remain free to develop on their own. Introduction to the council was to be voluntary, and primarily it would work as a trade union, an alliance to stop unnecessary wars. The others felt the council should begin regulating species, making sure that none grew too great or powerful in multiple ways. Those who didn't join the council would be pushed to the side and marginalized, left to stagnate without galactic economy and technology, to start policing their laws as applied to all species where they saw fit. When the Libertonians disagreed, they moved to leave the council and start their own organization. The rest of the council told them that leaving the council was an act of war, and the Libertonians attacked first. The Libertonians struck deep into various systems and sued for peace early on, but the arsehole Empire convinced the others to keep fighting. After that, it became a war of attrition, and the Libertonians were outnumbered very significantly. He read up on the various battles, noting that the council races always lost at least 5 times as many people, and often far more. He also noticed the council races had often make He also noted the council races would often make and break ceasefires to gain advantages, yet they didn't engage in total war. They'd leave infrastructure intact and stay away from population centers. It seemed Xenos kept industrial zones far away from residential. A galaxy without the concept of total war. Even so, in the end, the Libertonians were defeated. He read the terms of surrender. It seemed like the council took a very heavy hand against the vanquished. They were no longer a council race, couldn't trade, couldn't travel, and couldn't have a military, really. Plus just one colony off-world from their home planet. He realized why she wore a mask. Almost no one had ever seen a Libertonian. Almost no one had seen a live Libertonian in hundreds of years. Then he stepped past that and gasped. There behind a gleaming force field of some sort was a tall suit made of metal, wings up and extended as if in a flight. It looked like a massive Libertonian. The upper arms ended in claws, while the lower arms had some sort of energy weapons attached to them. The legs ran down into massive metal feet with 4 claws, 3 spread out on the front and 1 on the back. Is that an exosuit your people used in the war? Yes. One of the elite units would wear suits like that. You fit into it, and the sensors adjust the padding inside to your size. The suit was at least 9 feet tall. It's gorgeous, Billy Bob muttered as he looked up at it. He saw the diagram next to it and showed a Libertonian male, larger than Emily, but not by very much. It had somewhat larger arms, and the legs ran down into pointed feet. Ran down into a pointed foot, with 4 claws very similar to the suit. The downy feathers ending halfway down the calf and turning into tougher leather-looking skin. But then he noticed their fingers ended in long razor claws-looking talons. He looked over at Emily and her hands as she caught his look. We wear gloves to prevent us from stabbing everything that we try to pick up or hold. Then he looked back at the display. Then he looked back up at the display, watching a video of a Libertonian in flight. The large black wings were powerful enough to keep them moving, while they used a gossamer dragonfly-like material between their sets of arms to steer and turn. Then he thought it over. Those legs looked more like something he pictured on a dinosaur, like a raptor. And her muzzle was pointed out straight, like, well, not like anything he knew offhand. Not like anything he knew of offhand, but maybe a gator. Wait, weren't raptors birds? He gasped. The white feathers and the wings that led astray, they weren't just space eagles. They were flying space raptors. Space eagle raptors. Think that still works? He asked as he pointed at the suit. I mean, in theory they keep artifacts in original format and reactor is rated for 1,000 years, so maybe? He was staring at it when they heard some sort of chime and looked up. The tourists and employees began to crowd around the nearest holographic information terminal, seeming to think something was happening. The map of the museum was placed by some space poodle who looked fancier than usual. Dire and alarming news today. The council is announcing a state of war. There were murmurings of surprise around. There were murmurings of surprise all around. We're getting reports from the Arspace Empire that one of their primary worlds has been ruthlessly and savagely attacked. A new species known as the Americans has attacked their planet without an official declaration of war. The Arspace Empire is claiming this attack was unprovoked and completely against the Council ethics. The Prime Matriarch insists these are mercenaries hired by our old enemies, the Libertonians. They call upon our old Council races to join them in war against the new threat. An emergency session of the Council has been called. In the meantime, they advise citizens to be on alert for two highly dangerous terrorists.
Good morning, James. Hope you're doing well.
There was a picture that came up of Emily in her mask and a suit and Billy Bob, made from security footage. Emily gasped as the tourists around them turned and looked. But as she looked to Billy Bob, he was running over towards the display with the battle suit. He picked up one of the exhibit signs and swung it, smashing into the field generator on the side. There was an explosion as the device crackled and spluttered. The shield faded as the exosuit cops began to charge Billy Bob. Emily, get in the suit! We're going to take the gold record and get the feck out! And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker.
You did, James, you did. All right. Oh, big stretch. Yeah, there are a bunch of one-shots in the Sneakyverse written by the same author. Unrelated to the specific story, but in the general universe. We've done a couple. Between the two major series, he did write several one-shots that don't really fit into the timeline. They just are. Sometime after the first one and sometime before the second story. Or second book. Alrighty. That is 16,000 words. Well, close enough. 2.5 hours, non-stop. Voice is going a bit dry. So, I think it's going to be time for ending the stream. Thank you all for spending your time with me. It's very much appreciated, especially in this modern age where you have everything pulling for your attention in multiple directions. Spending that valuable attention and time with me is very much appreciated. I will be back tomorrow for more narrating shenanigans, and I hope you all have a great day.